CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Today, we are joined by Paul Crocker. He is with ReliabilityX. They're good friends of mine. They're friends of CMMS Radio. They're friends of the entire industry. And Paul is joining us today to talk about something that I think is super interesting, very creative, and I know it's meaningful to him. So first of all, Paul, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Hey, it's good to be on.
Yeah. So what I want to talk to you about is how two worlds collide when it comes to photography and the world of maintenance, or even maintenance and reliability. I want to know how you got into that, what that's all about, and just start wherever you want.
All right. Well, I'll start with photography first. When I was little, my dad had a Nikon. I forget the model was. It was back when Nikon was being made by an individual craftsman in Japan, and so it was all mechanical shutter and all that. And I remember just playing with it and then watching the shutter open and close. I was just fascinated by how it worked. And so I've kind of always been interested in all the little intricacies of cameras, and I guess my dad's love of photography transferred onto me because I like taking pictures of lots of stuff. I'm not so much good of a person picture taker. I like taking more pictures of just stuff. It's kind of weird invading somebody's space with a camera, so I try to I try to focus on other things than people when I do photography. So, but I really liked using it in the job I had prior to working with George. I was working as a maintenance supervisor in a drinking water treatment plant, and I would use it to document assets and locations to populate the CMMS system we used, and then just record general things around the plant. It was something wasn't running right, I'd set up a video on it and watch it, see if I could figure out what it was. And there was a couple of cases where I had actually caught and figured out, because the videos and pictures I'd taken, what was happening when some experts with the device couldn't figure it out. Just a long observation, I finally figured out what was going on. So I like using them. They're good tools. It's easier to communicate sometimes with a picture about something and give it to guys. Like we did a lot of plastic plumbing in a drinking water plant. You got a lot of chemicals that you use, and a lot of those either go in PVC or CPVC plumbing. And as we'd make a change, rather than the guys go out and taking measurements on paper, I'd go take a picture of whatever it was, bring it back to print it out and hand it to them in 11 by 17 sheet. And they go out and just put the measurements right on the drawing of what they needed. So it was a lot quicker than trying to go back and forth and, oh, did I forget that? So they had kind of what they needed right in front of them when they were making their measurements. So kind of making a mock-up on the printout of the screen, so they can work around other stuff that might be there that they, forget about when they go back in the shop and draw it up. So it's been handy for a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So, obviously in the world of CMMS, we like to type stuff out, create our work orders, and we've got our preventive maintenance items that are going to kick out on schedule, or maybe there's some other methodology as to how the PMs get generated. But if a picture is worth 1,000 words, which we really think it is, that's always going to come in to be helpful. But in your particular case, you've kind of got more of this idea behind that machine and what you can capture. It almost tells you a lot more than what it might tell the average person. So what is it that you're working on now when it comes to this concept of the photography and the videography in these maintenance environments? Because I heard a little something about a special project.
Well, a lot of times when we engage with customers, we'll use it to see what's going on with their equipment and help us document what's going on with it. So it's kind of the current state of what we use it for, at least for work stuff. But I've got a book I'd started writing, and it's kind of been in progress for 2 or 3 years, and it's kind of like, it's one of those things that's like, what can I say about photography that somebody else hasn't already said and probably said, hundreds of times? So it's like that's the struggle to get around get around with it. It'd be like trying to write another book on maintenance and reliability best practices when Ramesh's book has already exists. So it's
Yeah.
how do I make this new and interesting that somebody's going to pay attention to and read? So I had a giant like writer's block around it. So I just can't seem to get a good angle at how to do this and make it a fun, interesting sort of read. But we'll get there with it.
You froze up on me.
Yeah, same here.
So when it comes to this different angle, obviously it's going to be woven heavily into your work experience and how you walk plant floors and those types of things. Have you already started stacking up lots and lots of footage as it relates to the book, or is it more like two separate things where you're constantly capturing these images and using it for your own documentation for the things you do when it comes to a plant turnaround or helping somebody, better leverage their maintenance processes? Or is there kind of a method to that madness?
Really, the pictures and video just end up being, example material that you use in the book. At the previous job, I've been there uh, 16 years or so in the previous job. So I had 16 years worth of pictures. I think that translated about 50,000 images and videos on the on the network drive. It was, I think, well over a terabyte in size. So I got a lot of material I can go back and use. Problem is I got to, equate it up and like remove some surroundings so I'm not like exposing, vulnerabilities or whatever for a company. But anyway, if you're talking about a blurred image or something, you just find something you've taken a picture of that looks kind of not so good and you put it in as sort of a resource. Hey, this is what this looks like. When he's talking about focus, this is it. Or depth of field, this is depth of field. Your whatever's in focus is right in front of you and what's behind it's blurry. So you can use find some pictures we've taken like that and then use those as the examples in the book. Since that's a static document, you just have to have static images to stick with it.
Yeah. Do you have favorite types of equipment or scenarios you like to photograph when it comes to what you encounter when you're walking a plant floor?
Um, no, but I do find a lot of challenging sort of stuff. Um, Overhead lights in industrial settings are often really bright and intense, and a lot of times what you're taking pictures of might be shiny or metallic, and the angle you're looking at it, the light is getting reflected right off of that object back in the lens. So you'd say if I'm trying to get a serial motor or a serial number off a motor nameplate, and it's a metallic tag, what's catching all the glare from the overhead lamp where I'm at? See, it's kind of trying to block white or get an angle where that reflection is not overwhelming the information you're trying to get, like the serial number or um, voltage, whatever as it happens to be on that nameplate. So that's sort of the challenge in a industrial environment. And if they have limitations around taking pictures of people, you got to make sure that somebody's not standing behind it. And you also want to know people, there. Hey, I'm here taking pictures. It's for the equipment, and you don't want to take something with a flash maybe that might scare somebody and get them hurt, or whatever. So you do have to be conscious of your surroundings
Yeah.
when you're doing that. Whether it's most of what I'm going to focus on in the book is going to be pictures with cell phones, not necessarily a digital or SLR camera, because everybody's got access to one of these days. I've got great digital SLRs too, but nobody's going to be running around with a $7,000-8,000 Nikon and giant lenses in their plant setting in general. But you can
Yeah.
use that too, certainly.
Do you find with the environments you go into that on the CMMS platform, whatever one they have, there's less of a tendency to leverage image capture of equipment and nameplates? And is it kind of shocking and surprising to you? And if so, what do you think the barrier is to that for organizations that should be doing that kind of strong documentation?
Um, if the CMMS can't handle it, then you sort of need to set up a file share on their like corporate server that they can access, and then in a documentation you can save to the CMMS record, whether it's a work order or an asset or location or whatever it's whatever you're dealing with in it that you want to put the image with. If it can't sort of handle the image the way you want to, you can usually put like a reference in there, a URL. Hey, this is where it's at, to go get it. Some systems record that. The newer, more nimble systems are great at capturing pictures and video and storing it fine. And surprisingly, though, the older systems not so much. So there's one I'm thinking of that has terrible features around that. So yeah.
we'll be nice and we won't call out that one, not on the podcast, but we'll talk about it later. So here's another thing when I think about that you're passionate about getting these images. We know that it can be advantageous to have it in the CMMS, some form of a repository where you don't just read about stuff, but you can see what it is. Do you ever find a strong use case around documenting actual PM procedures, like the step one, this is what it looks like. The step two, here's the positioning on, say, for example, a torque wrench, or maybe you're doing a belt tension setting, anything like that. Have you used it for that type of thing as well?
Oh yeah, and I've seen some really great examples of that. One of the clients we had, we were working in their CMMS system, and I was trying to train them on the PM module. So I asked them, "Hey, give me a nice PM you've created for your existing system." And what I got from them, I was kind of blown away. I mean, it showed exactly what they needed to do for a big outage thing that they have to get to regularly every couple of years. You've got to cut a piece of this equipment out of the way, and it shows where to cut it and where to weld it back out, and where to sort of cover stuff with a fire blanket so it doesn't get burned up, and just a lot of other little detail things that maybe a particular craftsman would remember, but the next guy after him would not have any idea of. It was recorded to that level of detail. It was a several page document on, I forget exactly what it was. It's been too long since I looked at it, but it was really, really well done. There was another case at the plant where I was at. We had a collector well, big giant well where we pulled water out of the ground, and the building, to get the big motors out of it, they were at 500 horsepower motors. To get them out, you had to take the skylight off of the building and reach over the building with a crane, reach in, grab the motor, and pull it out. And no one had done it. I mean, nobody had messed with that skylight since the building was built. And I think at that point it was probably 15 years old. And so we used the camera and pictures just to record how you get it off, what tools you need, where the bolts and stuff are at, because it's all hidden, without going out there and pulling. It's behind a bunch of flashing on the external part of the roof. You have to lift the flashing off, lift up, and then you can see the bolts from the outside. You don't do anything inside. It's all external off the roof. So we documented that and then saved it in the system for the roof skylight and against all the motors. Anything that's got to come out that way, we put all that documentation in the CMMS. So somebody needs to know, several years down the road, that's not changing. The information's right there. And they want to go spend half a day trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, well, that's my next question, was when it comes to your photo documentation process or processes at your plant, your facility, one of the bigger barriers to organizations being able to incorporate that as what we might agree is a best practice, because you need to know it. And when you do need to know it and you don't have it, that's going to be very disruptive. But is it the disruption of making that somebody's job to go and gather these data points in images? Is that what prevents organizations from really turning that corner, or is it something else that they lack the knowledge and the skill set?
I think it's probably two things. Back in the days when you could have used SLR, you could have had just a central one. Hey, everybody use this. And so I built some training years ago before cell phones had as good cameras as they do today. I had a little Sony camera, I forget what model it was, one of the early alphas, and I gave it to some guys. I gave it to all the guys on my staff and said, "Hey, go take a picture of this motor nameplate." I didn't give them any other instructions. I said, "I just need a picture of this motor nameplate. Bring it back to me." I said, "Do me a favor on a Post-it note." I said, "Write your name on the Post-it note. Stick it next to the nameplate. So when I look at them on the camera, I know who took the picture." Well, I had 4, 5, 6. I had 6 guys working for me. I had each one of them go do it. Not a single one could I read the motor nameplate. Not a single one. So I was like, all right, well, I got to do something, because I can't just have the guys go take pictures for me, because they're going to give me like unusable, images. And I had sent another guy to an older facility that had a lot of hanging unit heaters that we needed to keep running. It was mothballed. We weren't using it anymore. We didn't, but it had utilities, water, and electricity running through it, and so we didn't want broken pipes. So I'd send him down there, handed him the camera, with the assumption that he knew what he was doing. And it was the same case. He spent 8 hours taking pictures, and not a single one I could use. So I was like, all right, well, I can't do this anymore. I don't have the time to go take these pictures. So I got to train these guys on the camera. So I made a big PowerPoint, kind of took time to figure out what I needed to show them in the camera, and tell them when I get something, I want a nice close up picture of that, as close as you can get without getting the surrounding information. Make sure it's in focus, press the button halfway to focus it, all the way down to take the picture. And then step back and get a surrounding picture so I know where it's at. If you just take a picture of a motor nameplate, that doesn't tell me anywhere where it's at, within the building, or, asset or anything like that. So give me an establishing shot so I know where I'm at and get a close up of the thing. And then I think a week or so after, I gave him the same exercise. I said, go take this camera, get me a picture of nameplate, write your name on the post-it, stick it on it, and then just bring it back to me. And they were all great pictures at that point. So it's one, you got to have a tool they can all use. If people are using their personal cell phones, they might say, well, hey, you're not paying for this, I'm paying for this, so I'm not using my cell phone to take pictures for company stuff, which is fine. But you got to bridge that sort of gap when you get to it. Not everybody's that way, but you're always going to find somebody that doesn't want to be a part of
Sure.
whatever, and you got to deal with it somehow. So it's either you do that, use cell phones, or you get a digital camera that everybody can sort of use to do that. And the platform, whatever you take it on, really doesn't matter. It's the procedures, and everybody's going to be a little bit different. Some companies aren't going to want you to take any pictures just because of what they do. Other ones are going to be more open. So it just kind of depends.
Have you ever crafted any guidance? I know you're working on the book, but any specific guidance on this, maybe within the context of, don't sleep on the opportunity to digitally document your assets, the nameplates and such. And here's a kind of, step 1 through 12 of how you do that, what you should watch out for, how you should craft that. Have you ever put something like that together? Not just in the environment you described, but like more recently where somebody could go and find it and learn it and read it?
No, I haven't, but it sounds like a great, excellent chapter to write for the book. The book. So it's definitely something that's needed because, if you haven't really ever thought about it, you might just casually think, oh, I'll take a picture of something and pull it off my phone later on, only to find out you've got 10,000 other pictures on your phone, and where did you take a picture? Where's that at? So you definitely have to have a little method behind it, or you'll drive yourself nuts trying to take pictures and look them up later. And it was probably a lot more difficult, maybe a more streamlined back when it was a day of 35 millimeter film. When the plant I worked at was built, it came online in May of 2000. It was a brand new drinking water treatment facility here in Kansas City, and state of the art at that time. One operator could run the plant, whatever shift, 24 hours a day. So when they documented the building of the plant, they used a 35 millimeter camera, and it was like a Pentax, and it had some lenses with it. Well, they keep that up in the main office. But when you're using that sort of camera, you have to know how to set it up, because you can't look at the pictures instantly after you take it. You just have to know that, hey, I had the focus right, I had the aperture right, I had the shutter speed all set, and all that. And if you don't know that, if you don't know how to do that, you're going to have a lot of, overexposed or underexposed or blurry images aren't going to be worth anything. Anyway, there was a big, thick book with all the documentation of stuff that they did underground and above ground and behind walls that you'd never see without those pictures. So they definitely had a nice, organized way to do it. And I've not been involved with any greenfield, sort of stuff, so I haven't had to really think that hard about how do I document this process and keep track of stuff. Most of my stuff's been brownfield, work. It's already built and existing, so I can just take pictures of it and say, hey, this is where it is and what it is, and save it with a date. One thing I did sort of figure out early on is if you're going to name files and put the date up front, it's best to use the year, then the month, then the day, then as opposed to day, month, and year. It'll make it a little bit easier for you to search them if you're looking by those that date field, at least kind of when you did it. and you can organize the images, together like around a certain day or whatever, and grab them all and drop them in a folder. Which is
Yeah.
generally how I did it where I was at. I just named folders for areas of plant, like collector well 1 or collector well 2 or high service or chem feed, and then I'd break that down inside, break down smaller assets or locations in there by their sections, and then drop the images in there, and then you could just sort them over time. And if I took one 5 years ago and one last week, you'd be able to tell sort of which one just by the date field on the pictures. So um, yeah, it helps to kind of know what you want and have it well thought out. Since it was all me doing it then, and I wasn't really thinking ahead, hey, I need to write a book of this someday. I never really did it, because I was doing it in my head at the time. But that's the sort of thing I'm trying to dig out of my head and think about how do I write this on paper where it's not like, it doesn't take a master's level to read it. Anybody can pick it up and say, just look, hey, you ought to do this real quick and sort of go duplicate it. Those are the kind of
Yeah.
things I'm needing to work on.
Do you ever get into other aspects of photography that relate to, I mean, obviously you're in maintenance and reliability, but if you're at, let's say, like a really cool plant that makes something really cool, and it's not about the machines that make that product, but
Right.
do you get opportunities to take nice photographs of finished products, like whether it's a vehicle, maybe they've assembled a specialty machine or something like that? Do you have any favorites you can talk about where you've done that?
I haven't. Most, I'd say all the engagements I've been on to take pictures of stuff in the plan, it was really for us more to troubleshoot and figure out what was going on with it, why it was doing whatever it was doing, and what we could do to make it better. So they weren't necessarily, ooh, man, let's blow it up and stick it on the wall because it looks cool. It was more
Yeah.
trying to hit a weird angle under something, trying to look at how a mechanism's doing its job, or catch some suction cups that are supposed to be grabbing a bag with high speed stuff, so you can see them like just touching the bag and not really pulling it open and product going on the floor. It's been more of stuff like that than it has been anything really sort of make uh, pretty marketing with.
Yeah.
I'd like to get those opportunities, and usually we just end up asking, hey, is it okay we take pictures and videos? Or if we're doing a project, that'll be sort of on our requirements end to be able to get that up front, because we want to have that. It helps us. You can't be at the client site 24 hours a day, or year after year. You got to get it where you're at, and being able to do that, having that in the language of what you're doing for your agreement with them is nice to have. So they can't say,
Yeah.
no, you can't take pictures here. I'm like, hey, it's in the documents and it's in the deliverables. We need to be able to take these pictures. So,
Yeah. I just did a site visit, and we couldn't take any pictures because people aren't allowed to see that kind of stuff. So I figure that that's going on. But for me, I'm thinking about, like, if I were ever at the National Corvette Museum, I want to go in the factory and I want to take pictures of stuff in there, and then I want to see some of the cars and take pictures of that. So I'm
oh
kind
yeah,
of thinking in that
oh yeah,
uh,
yeah.
view. When it comes to CMMS,
Mm-hmm.
maintenance management software, do you have, like, with current times, and we all talk about kind of the same stuff over and over, oh, your system will do all this for you, when we know it really is about your people and your process. But when it comes to this idea behind digitizing everything, do you have like a favorite thing that's happening now where you're seeing people kind of get the message? Or are you still seeing that there's just tremendous resistance because people want to focus on their wrench turning and they don't want to deal with leveraging a system?
I'd say people want to get through the day as quick as they can with minimal interruptions, and um, so sometimes doing something extra like taking pictures to document stuff isn't on their mind. So if you want them to do that, you got to stay on them about it. I mean, you might have some people who just love doing it and they're going to do it whether you ask them to or not. And then you're going to have people that you want them to do it as part of the job, something you needed, and then they didn't do it, and you're going to be frustrated they didn't. But you got to stay on them. So I've definitely had both kinds working for me over the years. I had the guys that no matter what you told them to do, they were opposed to it. It's not my job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully it's improving. I know we always see great stories where people get into it and they're like, yeah, I'll go take those pictures. Yeah, I got no problem doing that. And we hope that's improving day by day. I just wanted to, have a nice, light, simple conversation about the passion that you have for the photography as it relates to maintenance management, and these pieces of equipment. I do remember the one story you told me a while back about how leveraging a camera can help you see something that you just can't see with the naked eye, especially when you have bags being opened at a rapid pace, and you're not going to see it in action, and then you have that opportunity to slow it down. So that's really cool. I'm excited to see this book someday.
Right.
Once you get it done, we're going to keep bothering you about it, man, until you start writing it.
Yeah. Joe Anderson gets on me every once in a while, man, where's that book at? I'm like, I'm working on it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Joe, shout out to Joe Anderson. We were talking recently and he's like, hey, did you know Paul's really into this photography of equipment and machines and all that? Have you ever talked to him about it? I said, no, but I'm about to. So we got to thank Joe for giving me that idea. And, we're going to put this one in the can. Paul, thank you for being here with me on CMMS Radio.
All right.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.